Scott Pendlebury from the Collingwood Football Club. You're listening to the Coaches Panel.
This is Patrick Crouch from the Carlton Footy Club. You're listening to the Coaches Panel.
Max Gorn, Melbourne Football Club. You're listening to the Coaches Panel.
Number 47 in the 50 most relevant. Who is it? Okay, you already know. Based on the thumbnail, you figured it out. Matt Roberts from the Sydney Swans is who we are talking about today. An important cash cow to start last year. Became almost a premium for us at the end of 2024. But what does this new season hold under a new coach? We are going to talk about the potential fantasy and SuperCoach output for Matt Roberts in 2025. Joining me on this podcast, honestly, one of my favourite people to talk SuperCoach with. There are some great content creators across the community, and chances are, if you play SuperCoach, you know this man. You may have followed his incredible journey across the AFL Grand Final this year, where I don't even know if he's made it home just yet. But we'll find out and see. From the SuperCoach SwordPlay podcast, it's DR. Hello, mate. How are you? Can you confirm, have you made it home from the Grand Final yet?
MJ, how are you, mate? Thank you very much. Look, I made it home about 5 minutes ago, so just in time to sit down with you and have a chat. Great, man. But still on a bit of a high. I'm going to be riding this for a little while because you know how tough it is for your team to win a flag these days, particularly with 18 teams, soon to be 19 teams in the comp. So, still a very, very happy man, mate. And thank you for the very kind intro. You're one of my favourite people to sit down and have a chat with, and always a huge fan of the top 50 countdown, and wrapped and honoured to be a small part of it again this year, mate.
No, the good news is this isn't the only time you're going to see and hear from DR and the SuperCoach SwordPlay gang. So maybe he'll come back for one of his lines. We'll wait and see. Let's talk about Matt Roberts. He is eligible for us as a defender in 2025, which is important. 76 seasonal average in AFL Fantasy, a little bit higher, about 5 points per game higher in SuperCoach, that 80.7 marker. In that format, he's going to set you back just over the 430k marker, while in AFL Fantasy and Dream Team, due to their pricing cycles, and also the way they've given us a little bit more cash to play with, he's a little bit pricier in those formats. 780k in AFL Fantasy, while $770,500 in Dream Team. 20 games last year, and a top score last year is also career high scores. A 161 against the Bulldogs for SuperCoach, while in that same game for AFL Fantasy, it's a 138. Matt's a fantastic, phenomenally interesting player to look at for the 2025 season. Wasn't recruited as a run and carry halfback, rather was kind of recruited as this silky transition scorer through the midfielder, but has found his home after a number of years on the Swans list, found his home last year inside that defensive 6 unit, and ultimately spent most of that season through there. But DR, that's probably the thing we should start right there around with him, is the thing that ultimately got him into the Swans side, and certainly for SuperCoach, where that ball use and his quality of ball use is so high, makes him so tempting.
Absolutely, mate. Absolutely. And one thing that SuperCoach really rewards is kicking efficiency, disposal efficiency, but particularly kicking efficiency. Now, if you look back at the stats last year, Roberts actually rated 8th in kicking efficiency. And the blokes in front of him were those key forward types like your Andrews, your Moore, your Barras, that are more likely to do those little 30-metre type kicks. But the great thing about Roberts is that he's got that booming left foot, and he actually gets a fair few metres gained. So unlike some of the blokes in front of him for kicking efficiency, he's actually getting a lot more distance on these players as well. And that's another reason why he's trusted with some of the kicking duties. We might talk about that a little bit later, mate. But when it comes to kicking efficiency, Roberts is one of the elite users in the game. And that's certainly what we want coming out of our backlines.
It's rare you get a player that at one point of the year is this money maker, and then at the same year becomes a premium performer for us. He was so popular in our starting squads last year. He averaged 74 over the year, but 5 scores over 80 plus. The majority of those came at the back end of the year, and similar in SuperCoach with that average in and around that 80 marker. But it was really the final 7 games of the year that got people really, really keen on him, because that 74 average over the first 9 games in AFL Fantasy was good. 80 basically average, including a 117. So that's where that money really kicked up for us in SuperCoach with that early ton. But it was the final 7 games of the year that he really delivered. The middle portion of the year, a few vests, a few no plays, not really great, but the final 7 games of the year goes at an average of 104.4 in AFL Fantasy, 3 tons. He showcases his ceiling with 2 scores over 120, including that 138, nothing under the marker of 89. So right at that premium territories. While over in SuperCoach, goes at that average of 111 over the last 7 games, 4 tons, including that PB of 161, and nothing under 85. And so now we've got DR baked in a real interesting prospect due to a frustrating middle portion of the year. If you didn't jump off at the right time, you leaked some of that cash he made. But to be able to do those numbers for the last 2 months of the year, he's outperforming some of the premiums that we paid up big cash for at the back end of the year.
Absolutely is, mate. And look, I've really looked at his season, as you mentioned, with 3 real splits. You got that first 7 split, the middle 6, and then the last 7. So the first split did everything they needed for us, made us over 250K, a really reliable option, had that DPP as well, so we can cover in our defensive line, cover in the midfield as well. But it was that middle portion that tended to worry us a little bit. As I said, I omitted for a couple of weeks. One of the games he was actually rested. Longmire said, look, he's a really important player for us, but being a young player, really came into the side this year. We're just going to give him a little bit of a rest. But it seemed like that was a bit of a lull for him, and that's when lots of people tended to trade him out and drop off him. But the great thing was, as you mentioned, mate, that last 7 split was absolutely phenomenal. No sort of low scores, an extremely high floor, a great ceiling that we saw there as well. And competition for spots weren't as high due to one player that you were mentioning when we were talking pre-podcast, mate, leaving the side. And that always changes things up a little bit, doesn't it? You can only take one player at times to leave a particular role, fill somewhere else, and then that role's vacated. More points on offer, and I think that's when Roberts really came into his own, particularly when Florent moved up to the ground, when McInerney was out of the side, as you're mentioning, mate. So that last 7 split, in particular that post by average, means that he's a really interesting player for us to be looking at this year, and someone that I'm pretty keen on and certainly on the watch list, mate, because of those reasons.
That player you're alluding to is Justin McInerney, goes down injured in round 18, and as a result, multiple pieces of the puzzle move for this Sydney side. You're right. So Florent, who'd taken a pretty decent share of the kick-ins, really for the first half of the year, it was heavy Blakey, and then kind of a 50-50 split between Florent and also for Roberts. Florent pushes up to the wing a little bit more. Lloyd drifts back marginally, so does start to take a few kick-ins once McInerney's out injured. But Roberts becomes, alongside Nick Blakey, the offensive weapon outside of their defensive lines. Look, it's not fair because there is some vests in this, but if you look at the scoring of McInerney and Roberts when they play together and when they don't, it's a crazy huge split. Like, it's 62.8 in fantasy when he plays with McInerney. It's a 107 without him. Again, there's some vests in here, so it's a little bit, don't run too hard to the sun just yet. It's not quite pure. And then it's 66.6 in SuperCoach with McInerney, 113.7 without him. Really, it's the last 6 games of the year you should be focusing on where McInerney's out. And that's that 107 average in fantasy and a 113 average in SuperCoach. So it's not too far away from it, but really, really high sort of numbers when you look at those final 6 games of the year. That's a bit of a change. Now, McInerney did come back into the side towards that finals at the end. How confident are you in Roberts maintaining this role? Because he picked up his kick-in share, and we've seen a pretty significant change, at least from a coaching perspective, to the Swans with no longer Longmire there, Dean Cox holding the reins. How do you see this kind of all holding out for us? Because if he's not got the role and the elements of the Swans don't hold, this could be the kind of pick that, while there's plenty of value and upside, if we don't get these variables going our way early, it's going to be a frustrating start and a guy that you're going to jump off pretty.
Yeah, there is, I think, a few blokes that could really put their hand up for a best 22 role in that back line, particularly with that distributing role. So Blake is obviously, I think, his main competition back there. You've got blokes like your Florent. Callum Mills, now, where is he going to play this year? Is he going to push into the midfield? Will they keep him back? Not sure about that. And the new recruit, Riley Bice, as well, mature age recruit. Well, what are their plans for him? You'd assume if they're recruiting him as that mature age that they're looking for an immediate spot for him. May not be the case, but I think what really makes Roberts different from the rest of the pack is that disposal efficiency, that kicking efficiency. That really sets him apart from the rest of the pack for me. So if I'm looking at my cattle and if I'm Dean Cox, I'm thinking, well, who do we want the ball in their hands? It's Matt Roberts. I want the ball in his hands because he's going to kick it long, he's going to kick it well, and he generally makes some pretty good decisions with ball in hand. So look, it's a bit of a guessing game at the moment. We'll certainly need to keep a really close eye on the match sims, on the preseason games as well, to see what Cox is really thinking. But if I'm comparing him to the other players that I've got that are vying for that position, I like his upside, particularly with that kicking efficiency, mate. So I think there's a good chance that he keeps a role. But in saying that, okay, could he push up to a wing himself? Could they look for him to get the ball in his hands to be kicking inside 50? I don't know. That left foot weapon could be used in different areas of the ground. But for me, I really like him coming off half back, being that distributor. But who knows, mate? I'm not 100% confident, but he's probably the man I do like for the role.
And I think that's the beauty where we do have some of that risk that is truly needed to be raised throughout this episode. Some of this is going to be minimized for us with what we see through the preseason. Now that we're in January, we're going to start to see the clubs return, some of those internal club matchups. We're going to get a little bit of insight while they're playing double positions everywhere. If we were going to see him move up to the wing, we'd see that in preseason a little bit more than we would, given they've got to have two of every position covered. We know we're going to get at least one intra-club match, let alone that community series. And then the ultimate confirmation for us is they play yet again in opening round, meaning we get to see at least one of the scores before we have to lock our teams away. Meaning if he flies out of the gate, you can confirm that position. If he has that role that you're looking for, that solidifies that selection. If some things don't go his way, it gives you the reason to be able to deviate before it costs you either a trade and any money movements that go either side. With that, they do have only one price movement in SuperCoach before they're on the bye. And the first three games aren't super easy. They've got the Hawks, the Lions, your boys, and then the Dockers. And ultimately, there's one price movement in SuperCoach before they're on the rest. While in AFL Fantasy, they have a weekly price movement. So they'll have the double movement at the end of round one due to opening round. And then they'll have the next price cycle movement after round two. So everyone will have seen some cash movement out of Matt Roberts. But this buy is challenging. I think we've learned a lot as a community. We were really hesitant to go near almost anybody that had one of those first two buys last year as a community due to opening round and some uncertainty with how to play it. I feel like across AFL Fantasy, SuperCoach and Dream Team, we've got our head around with where we were overly conservative, where we can be more aggressive. But this buy is the biggest we've ever had early on. It is best 18, but Pies, Lions, he's not the only relevant name in our back line that if we jump on Roberts, it almost means we can't get on multiple others. This is an interesting and relevant selection, whether you fade or start Matt Roberts.
100%. If you look at even the relevant mid-prices in that particular round, you've obviously got his teammate in Callum Mills, who I think may be a really popular pick. Kitty Coleman's another one, my boy. You've got Perryman that's just moved to the Pies. And then you look at some of the more premium type players. Holmes is that breakout option. Tommy Stewart as that stored. Dan Houston that's just come to Collingwood. So it's going to be really, really tricky. I think it's probably a matter of picking between this group of players. I don't think you can overload too much, because the other thing we've got to talk about here is the fact that I've just mentioned guys that are in the back line specifically. I haven't talked about premiums from other lines as well. So if you're loading up on even 2 to 3 of these guys in your back line, then there's 3 missing already. And I know it's best 18, but it's very easy to fall into the trap of thinking best 18, I'll be fine. Then all of a sudden it comes to that round, you look at all of your lines and you're going, damn, could be in a little bit of trouble here. Whereas other teams that have planned a little bit better will most likely get a couple of extra premium scores to their best 18, or you might be getting a couple of those lower rookie type scores. So round 3 in particular is a very, very tricky buy. And so I'm guessing, I don't know which players are upcoming in your top 50, but I've got a feeling that maybe a few of these type of players we're talking about that may be featured. So that's another reason to stay tuned to this series, because some of these 50-50 decisions or selections, this is where you're going to get the best info about it. So very, very tricky buy, mate. Very, very tricky buy, unfortunately.
Dacos is in this buy group. Goulden is in this buy group. Dunkley is in this buy group. Neil is in this buy group. One of the most popular forwards, Bailey Smith, is in this buy group. Will Ashcroft is in this buy group. Like, these are highly owned, highly coveted names that are just outside of was like 8 defenders you listed for us before. And I think to double over what you just said, because you said it so well, but I reckon a few people might have missed what you said, was it's best 18. You might be able to get to the 18, but what you don't want to do is lose 4 or 5 firepower shots while others have structured things well. And yes, you have the most bench cover with what should be the most available cash cows in contrast to the middle portion of the season. But if I'm rolling through with now 8 cash cows on field, but DR's rolling through only 3 or 4, guess who's going to see a significant scoring bump that week, let alone the captaincy selections. Yes, in SuperCoach and Dream Team, we do have an extra player on field to carry through it with the flex. So it's now 18 of 23, not 18 of 22, but just balance that risk profile of your side a little bit more. Look, he's got an interesting early draw. The early buy does make it hard. Maybe I should ask you while we're talking about buys. So he'll have one price movement in SuperCoach. So he's priced at, let's just round it up to 435K. Barring him going 120, 120, 120, he's probably not going to jump up 70,000 in the first 3 games. And so that one price cycle movement. Is he someone that you'd almost be more tempted to look at as a round 4 trade-in? And as someone you go like, I'll get a few weeks of data, I will lose one price cycle movement, but it helps me just kind of navigate my way through that. Is that something that's just too early to strategically look at? Is that getting too cute, or is that the kind of way you like to play SuperCoach?
It's probably not the way I like to play SuperCoach personally, mate. I'm a little bit more conservative at the start and really back my trading to get me up the ranks. One thing that I think you've got to be really careful of is it's good to future plan, but don't lock in any future plans because carnage happens, as we all know. So if you're dealing with a couple of injuries or suspension, short-term suspension, if you're planning on getting Roberts in, I'm saying, yes, I'm getting him in this particular round, carnage happens, you simply may not be able to do it. So I think it's great to have a plan maybe in the back of your mind. Look, if he goes well, then these are my options to get him in, but certainly don't ever lock something in. It may be, an issue that, just say I start with a Jordan Clark. He's not looking fantastic early on. I can say, all right, I'm really confident with Matty Roberts now. I've seen him for a few weeks, got a really nice role. I'm paying up a little bit more, but I'm still making some money on this downgrade. So I think it could be a potential downgrade option after the buy if you've got a premium in your back line that's simply not firing. But I think it's always a bit of a dangerous proposition to lock a future trade in because it's never going to be guaranteed you'll be able to do it at the time.
Some good advice. There's a world where in 2025, based on Matt Roberts' starting price and what he's done for the better part of 2 months of 2024, where you're getting 30 points per game of upside. And you're getting him at a price range that is significant value, and he's delivering not just premium defensive territories, but at the upper echelons and right up at the top, matching it with the best defensive line options we have this year. So there is a world where he becomes one of the greatest value buys of 2025. There's a world where he drifts back and does what he did the first third of the season, which is pops the occasional nice score does give a little bit of value, but is not the premium in disguise that you are hoping for. And given that early buy, with the way you structure up your side and the tiering, as DR's talked about, of who do you like more out of these players that are off that week with that buy, with so many players' absence from our teams that are so relevant for us, well, the selection or non-selection of Roberts makes him relevant not just for himself, but the other players and structures and selections you have in the preseason. It is what makes Matt Roberts not only at number 47, but one of my 50 most relevant players for 2025. Before we go, we've got to talk draft, and we've got to let people that haven't seen or heard about SuperCoach SwordPlay find a little bit more about him. But on draft day, look, based on average last year, which is so often how the general consensus community drafts based off the preseason is, well, what did they do last year? I'll draft off that. And then a little bit of hype from the classic/salary cap community. They put those two variables together and they probably make their selection. But based on that, he's the 48th ranked SuperCoach defender and he's the 40th ranked AFL Fantasy defender. So we're talking in a 10-team league. That puts him at D4. DR, does that feel about the right sort of spot? You'd be happy to sort of pick him up? Because that feels pretty right to me. He might go early. If you're desperate, you really need to go D3. But D4 feels like the right sort of balance of risk versus reward.
Yeah, well, as you know, MJ, I'm not huge on draft. I'm in a couple of keeper leagues, so very, very keen to hear your advice in the preseason during the draft. But I think D4 does sound a little bit right. I think if you've got Matt Roberts at a D5 position, you're laughing, aren't you? Or you're just absolutely stacking your back line. One of the two, I'm not too sure. But yeah, it's where do you select him? It's a risky play to wait that extra round, I think, because if you know what you're doing in draft, I'm sure lots of people have him on their watch list and may just jump in there. The third round, it feels a little bit early in a way, doesn't it? So I think you've almost nailed it with that D4 selection, mate. So I'd be very happy to get him there. And I think any later than that, then it's an absolute bargain buy for us.
Yeah, you probably are running that gauntlet too of hoping that the player drifts further and further to you, which can absolutely... But with draft, there's always the variables. How many coaches, how many on field, what are the flexes are. But his average says D4. A keen coach will go D3. There'll be some optimistic coaches that hope he can be their last defender on field. I don't think that will happen. But you know what? Anything can happen on draft day. So let's wait and see how it is. Hey, mate,
That's right.
It's a pleasure talking fantasy football with you. SuperCoach SwordPlay, the brand new brand for where we can get in touch with DR. And not so much a brand. We've known the podcast, but now the YouTube channel, the whole brand is all about SuperCoach SwordPlay. What have you guys got coming up for us in the preseason, and where can we check out your great work?
Oh, firstly, thank you very much, as always, for having me, mate. It's such a pleasure sitting down, having a chat with you and really picking your SuperCoach brain as well, because you're one of the veterans out there, mate, particularly with the content creating. So thank you very much for having me on again, mate. And yeah, we've made a bit of a change with the channel. Everything stays the same, but given the fact that we've got our SuperCoach SwordPlay podcast, we've got the website, we're selling our own merch now, which is supercoachswordplay.com. It just made sense to us to go from SuperCoach with DR to now branding it as SuperCoach SwordPlay, mate. But same old stuff. You get the stock markets, get your round reviews, lots of preseason content, mate. We're going through all 18 team previews, and I'd hope that you might be able to join us. One of those in particular, mate, and plenty of in-season content as well. We're going to do something that I haven't seen done before, and it's going to be a bit of SuperCoach Talkback Radio where people will be able to phone in or dial in on the StreamYard and actually be part of the audience and have a bit of a rant or ask some questions after the round is done, mate. So, yeah, really exciting stuff with Spills, Janet and Roscoe. And, yeah, we'll be collaborating with lots of blokes like you and yourself. And I think that's the best thing about producing content, isn't it, mate? All the connections and the networks that you make. And I can call so many content creators really good friends of mine. So, plenty to look forward to, mate. And yeah, thank you very much again for having me on. I'm a big fan of the top 50 and we'll be watching every episode very, very keenly. Sean Darcy's in my side already, so there you go.
You may have ruined your team. Who knows? Hey, mate, absolute pleasure. If you want to go and check out some of those places that DR's just referenced, you're like, oh, what was that website? Where is that YouTube channel? The good news is we've placed all those links in the description of this episode, so you can go in check it out, click on it, buy some of the merch, check out the great content that has been coming through the preseason and will, let alone during the 2025 season proper. Hey, in a few seconds, I've got a clue for who's sitting in at number 46. Do you think you know who it is? I'll give you a chance to guess in about 30 seconds' time. But you can go back and check out all the players revealed so far in the 50 most relevant. We're a handful of players in, so whether you're listening to the audio podcast, wherever you are, make sure you subscribe, like, and give it a 5-star rating. If you're checking us out on YouTube and you haven't subscribed, make sure you do so. If you're picking this great man, give us a like on the video, but comment below and let me know, how much do you think Matt Roberts is going to average in 2025? We'd love to know your thoughts. And as well as checking out all the SuperCoach SwordPlay team's info in the description of our episode, you can also get in touch with us across social media. Check out all of the other places where you can grab our Coaches Panel merch and join our Patreon, where breakout and premium tier supporters are already a day ahead on the audio podcast. It's just one of the many great rewards that they get for signing up at one of those two tiers. All right, number 46 in the 50 most relevant. It's a player that he's scored multiple hundreds at his first club. He's now at a new home and has been recruited for a purpose that could actually make this team shoot up the ladder way faster than anyone gives them credit for. Because there's been an Achilles heel in this team for many, many years. Bit players have been there, but now they have the out-and-out option that they've been looking for. And he is super important to your structure, let alone to his team that he's now got as his second home. Who is he? You'll find out tomorrow in the 50 most relevant.